Bulletproof Selling. Sean Rhodes here, the Chief Sales Architect of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book, Bulletproof Selling, a Guide for Systemizing Sales on the Battlefield of Business. Now here, every single one of these podcasts, every single one of these live streams, we begin with the saying, hope is not a sales strategy. And that's why we're here each week, multiple times, to increase the performance of salespeople, the results of their pipelines, and of course, the results of their teams. Now, this live stream series that we have, that we also, of course, you're listening to us on a podcast, we get to talk to the top minds in sales, best-selling authors, trainers, speakers, consultants, and of course, those that are out there in the field actually managing salespeople. My commitment is that of every one of these episodes, we will build a sales system that you'll be able to use no matter the size of your goals or the size of your team. Now, one of the people that I have one of the top utmost respect for in the world of sales is the guest that I'm going to be inviting onto the show here in a couple of seconds. Why? Well, he's figured out how to build systems around interview-based selling. Now, he does that through podcasts and a host of other things, but we're going to be talking with him kind of about his background because he was literally born into the world of sales. He's got one of the most famous sales families probably on the planet behind him, but he's also made a mark in the world for being able to bring people into the world of systems-based selling and interview-based selling. It is my pleasure to welcome to the show Mr. Doug Sandler. Doug, welcome to Bulletproof Selling, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here. And as you were building that intro, I thought, Jesus, is Zig Ziglar's son here? This is going to be great.
No, man, it's just you. It's just you. Now, Doug, but before we dive into it, tell us a little bit about the family that you come from, in case people don't know who you are or what you do.
Sure. Well, Dave Sandler, the creator of Sandler Sales, is my dad. Was my dad. He passed in the mid '90s. Loved having him as a mentor in the world of selling, and man, what a great group of conversations that we'd have around the dining room table, in the car, on the boat. No matter where we were having a sales conversation. He just kind of tricked me into understanding that sales is just a part of everyday methodologies that we all go through, and it doesn't need to be a challenging thing. It just needs to be a systemized thing. So that's a great place for us to probably have a beginning of the conversation.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And now, so hope not being a part of anybody's strategy that's successful in the world. I mean, I know, and you probably do as well, plenty of people that seem like they've stumbled into success. These overnight successes where really there's like 10 years of hard work and grinding and systemization behind it. And suddenly we see these people enter the scene and it's like, I've never heard of you before, but you're absolutely out there killing it. That's great. Well, for what you do now, your first mark on the world, one of them was the idea that you don't have to be a hammerhead and succeed in the world of sales. So tell us about the Nice Guys podcast and this concept of being able to still win in the world of sales by being a genuinely good human being.
Yeah. And before I even talk about the podcast, I want to talk about the purpose of the podcast, the reason behind it. I wrote a book called Nice Guys Finish First back in 2015 that quickly rose to the top of the Amazon charts, not realizing that there was plenty of other nice guys that were out there that were just not understanding that you could finish first. You know, the expression is nice guys finish last. And I really wanted to dispel that myth. I think one of the areas that I really focused on was the Gary Shandling quote on chapter 1, which is, if you don't think nice guys finish first, then you don't know where the finish line is. And the reality of it is, you don't have to be a tyrant. You don't have to rule with an iron fist, and you don't have to be a bully in order to win. I think that people, especially nowadays where social proof and social media are as huge as it is, the ruder, the bullier, the more tyrannical you are, probably the more the world is going to hear about those instances. Conversely, the nicer you are, the more that you let the world in to build a relationship to see who the real you is, which is really the epitome of what the internet is all about, is showing people who the real you is. The better you are at being you and being a nice guy, actually, the more quickly you actually can get to that winning position, or in the case of sales, into that closed position. And money doesn't have to be a 4-letter word. So I don't want people to think you can't be nice and make a lot of money all at the same time. You can do that, and you can be rich at the same time.
Absolutely. And then your podcast, millions of downloads, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right by this time?
Yeah, we have 1,200 episodes of our show, slightly over probably at this point, 4 million downloads, downloaded in 175 countries all over the world. And it has been a major contributor to the success of this second career that I've had since 2015, when I wrote the book and created the podcast to begin with.
And you've had the kind of winding road, if you will, of figuring out how to do that podcast as well as you have. But at 1,200 episodes in, I'm guessing you could probably produce the thing in your sleep, because 1,200 reps of anything, I mean, it's quite a lot. But yet I know and you know that you've got systems behind what you do, from how you source your guests to how you edit that podcast to people you use to do that for you. And then, of course, how you release it and how you promote it and how you use that as a business development tool. So with all the systems behind what you do and the people that you get to talk to and interact with, and I know you get to work with salespeople across the world as well, where do you see salespeople relying on hope a little more than they should in their sales strategy?
Yeah, well, hope is not the thing that gets the phone to ring, and I think that's the biggest challenge that most people have, is that they don't differentiate sales from marketing. We got to get the phone to ring, and then once the phone rings, we've got to figure out what to do with that prospective client once they get into our ecosystem. Treating them nicely is just a great way to do it. Delivering, exceeding expectations every time, doing what you say, and then beyond, being on time for appointments. All of those things. You can't be late for an appointment and expect that person to respect your time because you're not respecting their time. I mean, simple things, writing a handwritten note, personalized thank you email, any of those things in follow-up or in the prospecting process is extremely essential. Hope is not a great system to rely upon. If you think the phone is going to ring just because you have a great product or service, think again. There are many people that have amazing products but can't get their phone to ring. And once they do get the phone to ring, they don't really have a system by which to handle their prospect. And that's all got to change in order for you to have, it's not just to have a system that's successful, but it's to have a system that's measurable. I'd like to know that if I have 20 prospects come in the door, that I'm able to put 1 or 2 into my products or services. And for me not to know that means that I'm just relying upon luck for not only the phone to ring, but for the sales to be closed. And that's not a system that's worth banking on.
Now, you mentioned a couple of things there that are really good strategies for salespeople to use: the handwritten note, the follow-up email. And I hear things like that, and I read a lot of great sales books, and I attend a lot of great sales training, and I hear great strategies just like that. But the problem that I ran into in the early days of my career as a salesperson was trying to remember to do it all. Because I could go to a seminar and walk away with maybe 60 great ideas, and then how many of them get implemented? Well, I'm part of the National Speakers Association, and I'm sitting down with a group of speakers during a conference, and they say, this is really overwhelming because we're hearing from the best in the world, the best, the Zig Ziglars of the world, right? And they said, well, if you can walk away with just 2 or 3 things that you actually implement, then that's good ROI. And I'm listening to these people. I'm like, I paid thousands of dollars to be here, travel, hotel, everything else. 2 to 3 things is a terrible ROI for me. I don't care if those 2 to 3 things are just, $100 million ideas. If I have 60 of these, why would I not put as many into practice as possible? And I couldn't do that from memory. So that's where systems really began to play into how I began to see the world and my business and developing great sales, in that I don't have to think about what comes next. Systems handle that. I'm interested to know from you, obviously you were raised in systems. Sandler sales training is all about systems. When you began to branch off on your own and you began to teach other entrepreneurs and other salespeople about this, where did systems really take hold for you? I mean, deep into your soul, because I know you're a systems guy. That's why we connected so well. Where did it start for you in systems? Well,
and again, really good question. And there are so many different subsystems within systems that you can implement within your organization and within your sales cycle or within your process. And what I would say is, if you come back to the understanding that nothing happens until you sell something, you would rely upon the idea of possibly that, why don't we work on our sales system first, and then we can go in and work on, like, am I really going to work out my implementation and delivery systems if I don't have any customers? How do I even know if it works or not? Yes, you do want to have a skeleton structure for what you want to put together. But over and over and over again, as I'm training podcasters and people that are in the world of interview-based selling to build their systems, they get stuck in the minutia of, what's my marketing system look like, and what does my accounting system look like, and how am I going to train my staff, and how am I going to train my customers, and how am I going to build my art and my brand and all of that. They forget, hey, look, until you sell something, none of that even matters.
Yeah.
And I, again, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool sales guy. So for me, again, sales hammer, sales nail, everything looks like a sales nail to me from that perspective. It's like, why don't we just work on getting some prospects to kind of go through the system? Don't even have a specific, highly defined product yet until you know that that's the product that your customer, prospective customer, actually wants. So if you rely upon the strategy of nothing happens until we sell something, let's build a system around the selling process.
And that was actually the thing that kept me out of bankruptcy in the early days of my business, losing money trying everything. And I was on the model where I was trying to be an online course creator and an author and a speaker and a coach and a consultant and writing books, all the things at once. None of it was working out very well. And so I had to finally decide, all right, I've got to just, put it on the line here and stop focusing on everything that's behind, the actual sale. I have to focus on the sale because I've got to generate revenue. And that doesn't happen because I'm sitting in my office coming up with the next great paragraph in the book that I'm trying to write. It happens by putting it on the line, maybe getting rejected, but talking to people that have the ability to buy my products and services. Now, one of the things that you've really put your focus on and your intention, and you're one of the masters in the world at this, is the idea of interview-based selling. So for salespeople that hear that, they're like, well, I'm interviewing every prospect on the phone that I call and talk to. But what's the difference between what your idea of interview-based selling is and a cold call or even a warm call? How do those things differ?
Yeah, what's interesting about it, and I use the podcast to be kind of the umbrella by which interview-based selling becomes so easy to mention to a prospective customer, because as a salesperson that sells, let's say, podcast production or whatever it is that you sell, executive coaching or accounting services or whatever it is that you sell, you prospecting a customer oftentimes means trying to get them. You can't sell them over, maybe you can, but the best relationship is developed through either a Zoom call, unless you're face to face with them, or selling through email or direct messaging is not really easy. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to get them on the phone. And oftentimes, as a way to get them on the phone or on a Zoom call or face to face, you as a salesperson calling to asking him questions about the services that they have that might be competing with what you have right now. Hey, John, I know you already have an accounting system in place. What's some of the stuff that you love about it? What's some of the stuff, the typical prospect dance that you're going to do? Mm-hmm. Really challenging to even get that prospect on the phone. But if my call to them is, hey, John, my name is Doug Sandler. I have a podcast called All About Accounting, and we are interviewing top-ranked accounting people. Would you be open to having a conversation on my podcast and sharing your story with my community? Very rare that someone would say no to that. You flip the script. Instead of it being a 90% no and 10% yes, I get a 90% yes and 10% no. Now it's up to me to understand, how do I actually pre-qualify somebody before they're sitting in that guest seat, or in the time that they are sitting in the guest seat when they're there and actually talking to them? How am I pre-qualifying them during that interview process to see if they actually fit my products or services? You do that a few times, you understand the exact questions to ask, exactly how the questions work, where they fit well into your process. And you'll have a line out the door pretty quickly of not people that want to be guests on your podcast, but people that are actually queuing up to be your client. And I would challenge the people that are in your listening community to understand that when you approach it from a confidence perspective, that I know that I have more prospects than I have room for as clients on my client list. You're very particular with who your clients. So I get to pick my clients now. And it's not like you're tricking them to get on your show. You actually do. I do have a podcast, just like you could have a blog, just like you could be doing article writing or whatever it is that you're doing. I do share that information with my community, but ultimately it's not about my community learning. It's about how am I filling my client list. And for me, when I discovered this strategy and I put it into play, the six-figure income developed almost overnight. Literally within 3 months, we had made over $100,000, $35,000 in our first month of doing this process. I'm like, this is totally the easiest. I don't have to prospect anymore. And how cool is that? And I know that we all say that as salespeople, prospecting is the worst part of the job. And it's the easiest part of the job for me now. I'm just looking for guests for my show. They just happen to be highly qualified for the products that I sell.
And something that I think really turned prospecting around for me, because I love it, even if I'm picking up the phone. Obviously, I love talking to sales leaders on Bulletproof Selling here, but it's being able to flow through almost a gamification, if you will. So for your point about being able to qualify these folks either prior to getting them on the show or while they're on the show, well, that list of questions has to exist. And for me, depending on who I'm talking to and what service I think they might be a good fit for that I might be able to offer, well, there's that list of questions I've got to have in front of me ahead of time. And so my goal is, how many of those can I get answered and still make it sound like an organic flowing conversation, instead of like, they're being,
Sales interviewed.
Like I'm trying to think of the word, like they're in a prison, right? Like you're being deposed. Nobody wants to be deposed, anytime really, I don't think. So for me, it's about, all right, I've got these questions I need answered. And if I can check 9 out of the 12 boxes, this might be a really good prospect for me. I could really add a lot of value into this person's organization. And so from being able to do that through these interviews, and even through just picking up the phone and calling, I mean, interview-based selling, and we'll get to it in a minute here, doesn't have to necessarily look like a podcast. It's very easy to do, and it's a very popular platform to have. But you could also, as you mentioned, interview-based sell around article writing, around blogs, around video blogs. So maybe you don't want to do a podcast. You just want to do a live stream series. Beautiful. It's the same platform. So The question now becomes qualifying people in. So I could probably transfer a lot of what I'm already doing as a salesperson into this process, because if somebody checks all the boxes to make a good prospect just from me picking up the phone and talking to them, that's already handled for when I get them into an interview. So now the next question is, all right, how do I interview them in such a way? And this could be any prospect, by the way. So anybody that's listening to this, any one of your prospects could be a candidate. How do I interview them in such a way that it does provide value to the industry that I'm in, while at the same time helping me deepen that relationship to figure out, is this going to make a good client?
Love it. Love it. Excellent question. And that is one of the areas where many of my clients in the beginning parts of this, they stumble because they really do feel like, well, I have to turn this into a sales interview. And I said, no, You're putting way too much pressure on yourself when you turn it into a sales interview. What you need to do is you need to listen to the prospect, or the guest in this particular case, with 2 ears. One, how can their message best serve your community that's listening, provide value to the community, but also how can they provide value by getting on your client list to your company? So the way to do that is pretty simple. The interview process is pretty straightforward. One, you get them to tell their story. When they share their story, they're loosening up, they're sharing a little bit, they're becoming comfortable with you as an interviewer and subject. Two, build them up with the accolades that they've achieved in their life. Talk about the sales awards that they have won. Talk about the sales teams that they have built, the millions or billions of dollars that they have brought in revenue. Three, find out what it is that they are really happy about with their career, the areas that they are. Now, you've done 3 things to kind of help them get a proper stance with you. They're not on the defensive. They're not prospecting. You're not being prospected. They're sharing their story. The area where I really talk to them about is, prior to even starting the interview, I say to them, John, one of the things that we're going to do during the interview is I'm going to ask you to share your story. I'm going to talk about some of the wins, your successes, your victories. I also want you to do me a favor. For a moment during this, I need you to show some relatability and some vulnerability to my community. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to ask you things like some of the stuff that you're still working on, some of the stuff that you're still struggling with, some of the stuff that's your challenge today when it comes to fill in the blank of your services.
And these are the really classic, what keeps you up at night kind of questions that are just happening today. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing that I ask them is, before I even go into the interview, before the interview starts, I ask them, are you okay with this? Is this an area where you're comfortable? I have never had somebody say, no, I'm not comfortable with this. You know why? Because they're not feeling like they're being prospected. They're feeling like they're sharing their message and their vulnerability. And if they do have any level of discomfort and ask me, why do they need to do that? I would simply say, hey, this is a relatable podcast. It's all about showing that my community can do what you've done if they just know that you've been through the same struggles that they're going through right now.
Right.
And again, I've never had anybody say to me, nope, I'm not going to do that. And the other thing to keep in mind as you're going through this interview process with your prospect or your guest that's sitting in the guest seat is, as soon as they share that problem, do not jump down their throat and solve it for them. Don't just go to their rescue and tell them, hey, I got services that can fix that, and sign here, press hard. That's not what we're doing. We have plenty of opportunity, especially in interview-based like podcasting, where the episode hasn't aired yet, or it has aired and you're getting response from your community, or you're getting some feedback from people that are on your production team. There are plenty of opportunities for you to reconnect and have another touch point with them. So you do not need to solve that problem unless, the only rule to that is, unless they ask you to help solve the problem right then and there.
On the air. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I've done that plenty of times with people on the air where they say, how would you handle that? I'll say something, somebody will say something like, I'll ask them the question, as it relates to marketing your business, what's some of the stuff you're still struggling with? And they might just say, hey, I feel like the best kept secret, or, I feel like I'm not really getting my message to the right market. And they might say, what would you do in that particular case, Doug? And that's where I'll say, hey, I'm a podcasting hammer. Everything looks like a podcasting nail. So let me ask you a simple question. Why the hell is it that you don't have a podcast? And I just shut up. And I let them share with me why they don't. I've tried it before. I didn't like it. It was too technical. All of the stuff that is like the top level stuff. Tell me more about that. Share a little bit more about why that is something that you're afraid of. Let them share a little bit more.
That's off the air when they're not feeling like they're having to defend their priorities and their time management and everything else. Yeah,
it could be on, it could be off. It just depends on who they are. And you as a salesperson and the expert, as long as and I come back to that nice guys finish first and the nice guys on business podcast. So the theme is nice. As long as I don't approach this from I know better than you. Why the hell are you having that? That's a bad problem. I can't believe you have that problem.
Yeah. That's assuming they're broken. Yeah.
Right. That's already assuming that they have a problem that you can fix and that they are broken. And that is never a good place for you to put them in the position while your community is listening to it.
And if you're a salesperson listening to this interview right now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, this all sounds good, but what would really the value be? Or, I could interview people all day because I talk to people all day on the phone anyway, or via email or on Zoom or in person. But what is this supposed to accomplish for me that's going to give me enough passion for it to keep going? And so I'll give my answer. And then, Doug, I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah.
So you can add to it or differentiate from it. The idea that you're interviewing people that are the peers of the people that you're selling to. What that means is now you become a hub of information. Because if I can talk to 10 other people that are the peers of the prospects that I'm targeting, so let's say I'm targeting wedding planners, random thing. Not even anyone in my network's a wedding planner, but let's just say that's the case. Well, if I can talk to 10 wedding planners and I can put together 10 things that you need to know about coming out of COVID as a wedding planner, right? Something like that. That's interview-based selling. Not only are all of the 10 people I interviewed for that article, that blog, that podcast, that video series, potential prospects in the future for the reasons we just talked about, but also now I have an asset that gives me a way to open any door with any wedding planner because that's my asset or it belongs to my company. I can share it with my team. My marketing team can now send it out and send all the leads back to me or my sales staff. There's a lot of different great ways to be able to do that, but I think it comes from this mindset of I want to be the thing that all of my prospects orbit around. So even if they're not trying to buy from me today, they're coming to me for information because eventually they will fall into becoming clients. What would you say is the mindset that someone has to really start this off with if they want to begin interview-based selling?
Well, you have to realize that people fit into one of three categories as guests that are coming on your show. First of all, you have the guests that are like if you're a leadership expert, the VIP guest might be a guy like John C. Maxwell. Or if you're a sales expert, it might be somebody like Jeffrey Gitomer. Or if you're an entrepreneur, it might be Arianna Huffington. And a political expert, Ron Klain, chief of staff for Biden. There's many VIPs. The VIPs aren't the ones that you're looking to turn into clients. There's also those people that are out there that are the influencers, the community builders, the ones that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers on social media. They're going to help you get your social proof, but they're not your clients. Mm-hmm. You have got to understand that this is not, let me invite the world on my show to get them in the guest seat to figure out which one is a potential moneymaker for me. You've got to categorize influencers, community builders, and money makers. And if you're looking to make money on your show, you've got to just focus for a finite period of time on that money maker category. Interview-based selling is just one of probably 20 some odd ways that you can make money podcasting. You've got to be open to opportunity. JV partnerships, selling your products or services through affiliate relationships and selling their products and services to your community as well are just two other ways that you can make money podcasting. So when it comes to systemizing and understanding who to bring on your show, just know that those three buckets, influence, community, and money making. If you want to make money, focus just on that money making for a finite period of time until you start to get, look, if you're doing a weekly podcast release, that gives you 4 opportunities. I'd much rather have 4 opportunities than 1 of 4 because I've got 3 other influencers and 1 guest that I can make money from. So just understand who it is that is sitting in that guest seat. That would be key.
So let's build a system around this because I think it's something that can help any salesperson not only learn more about their prospects, but become an influencer in their own community. And as we all know, if you're the center of attention in the world that you're in, you're much more likely to draw in those people that, because again, just like you, Doug, I love referrals. I love inbound leads, but I'm also not going to base the livelihood of my family on waiting for the phone to ring. So I've got to take the initiative, reach out there and become that person that either has the solution that I can sell straightforward like I've been doing my whole life, or now maybe through this interview-based method, I can start creating things that I can now have as ways to open conversations with people that I might not have never been able to talk to before. So when we talk about building systems here at Bulletproof Selling, we're trimming hope away from our sales strategy. So we use the acronym TRIM. Now the T in TRIM is trigger. So if I'm a salesperson and I've never stood anything like this up before, I've never done interview-based selling, what is the trigger that I need to really pay attention to? Because I'm talking to people all day. Some of them might be really, really good resources for me just to ask a simple question that I write down an answer to and continue on with my sales conversation. And that simple question might be, hey, what's changed in our industry? I'd love to be able to share that with all of the people that I'm talking with, if it's all right with you. So what is the trigger for me to really begin paying attention to amongst all the people I am talking with? Which ones might be good sources for this interview-based method?
Well, the first thing that you can do is just ask them, hey, can you just do me a favor? I'd love to chat with you. Can you share, just give me a 30-second snippet of your story? Because from what I'm seeing on LinkedIn right now, you're a pretty fascinating person. Can you share, or interesting person, or whatever it is that you feel like isn't a BS word that you're going to use in your in your language? Share a little bit of your story. Let them share their story. And then just simply ask them, when it comes to X, Y, and Z, put in your industry, when it comes to accounting, when it comes to dog training, when it comes to wedding, planning, what's some of the stuff you're still working on? And let's just hear their answer. Just listen to their answer. Great answer. I'd like to invite you on my show, or I'd like to do an interview with you, or would you be open to going on Facebook Live and sharing your story with my community, who I think would be really interested in what you have? And that would be the first area. You said something that's really interesting. And it was something, and I don't know the exact words that you used, but let's take hope out of the system, but let's look at it from a perspective of outbound rather than inbound. Right now, we get more leads that come in the door than I can handle. But in the beginning of this process, it was all outbound. So the first thing you need to do is, where are you meeting your prospects now? Are they on LinkedIn, or is it through networking? Is it through conferences? Is it through live events? What is it through where is it that you're meeting these people right now? Use the same prospects as your prospects, and just flip the script a little bit. Think about it as, what information can I get from these people that I think would be interesting for a community of other people like me to hear? And when you do that, you stop being a salesperson, you start being an interviewer, and it gets a lot easier for you.
And as someone that's gotten to interview folks around the world for about 20 years, I can tell you that when you become an interviewer, it's almost like you're a therapist, and people will reveal things to you, and you're just like, whoa, we just crossed the line there, buddy. Like, I didn't need to know that.
This microphone is truth serum, and I say that over and over again to all of my clients right now that are in the podcast production world. People do not tell you a lie when they are sitting in front of that microphone, because that lie will be out on the internet forever. So they're very careful with the words that they're saying. At the same time, if you handle them right, they will be very forthcoming with the information, the stuff that they are still working on, and the challenges and struggles that they're having.
Yep, I love it. So we've got the trigger being just work in that one question. If somebody's chatty with you, or you do want to target them, and I use this as well, just like you do, for somebody that I might not have ever been able to get a conversation with. But if I approach it like, yes, I do work for this company, I am in sales, but hey, I'm building this article, I'm building this resource, for my professional association that you're also a part of. Find some common ground, some common connection to be able to say, here's why I would love 30 seconds of your time, because you'd really be able to help us all out with the insight that you've gained over the last few months or years or decades of your life. So that's the trigger. Now I want to make this thing repeatable, because I don't just want to sometimes do this when I run across somebody that might be a good prospect in the future, or somebody that might be a really enterprise level client at some point. So how do you recommend that salespeople that don't already have this in place going for them, how do they begin tracking, one, the questions they're asking, and two, the process they use to turn these things into content, whether it's an article, a blog, a video, a podcast? I mean, that could look 1,000 different ways, but how do I begin, one, tracking my questions, making sure I'm asking them, and two, making sure that I am producing something that does go to my community, so this isn't just a wasted effort?
So we have a pretty good system in place that has been honed and fine-tuned over the last 1,200 of our own episodes with our show and thousands of episodes of our client show. And we've built a pre-qualification application where people are actually applying to be on our show, not realizing they're actually applying to be clients, because they're asking some pre-qualification questions. So we use a real easy form fill program or app called Woofu, but there's many of them out there. Google Forms, I think, is free that's out there, and there's many of them that are out there. The answers to those questions are all emailed automatically to me, so I don't have to do anything other than just read my email in the morning to see who's filled out an application from the weeks or months or now years of those links that I have sent out to prospective guests for my show. And it's interesting. I've gotten plenty of applications from people that I've given the link to, over a year ago, and they're just now kind of, now I have a product that I want to share with the community, and now I'm going to start to fill out that application. So the application formulates an email to me. That email generates a pre-qualification checklist for me. I'm like, oh, they've answered the questions. These questions were answered properly. I just send out another email to them saying, congratulations, I'd love to have you on the Nice Guys. That, and again, that could be automated. We do it manually just because I like to see every application that comes in the door. They get an automated link to my schedule. The schedule gives them automatic updates and confirmations. And then after the interview's over, it even does follow-up. It does everything with the exception of interviewing the person, which is something you want to do anyway. So that whole system from soup to nuts, from beginning to end, is almost, I would say 90% of it is automated. And then after they're done, if they express any interest, again, they're in my sales cycle now. So now a lot of that's automated. And if it's something that they're looking for a one-on-one or concierge treatment type of service, that's all handled by us personally. If they're in our automated online system, it's handled all through our automated funnel, which has 17 emails that go out over the course of 17 weeks.
That gets complicated. So if I'm a salesperson, I'm just starting this. I mean, I always, when I build systems for sales teams, I say, let's keep it simple. And then once you learn, now you can get 17 emails and 1,700 separate steps that are all automated that you never have to touch again. So if you're a salesperson just starting this out, I would say limit it to easily, right? When I show people the back end of my business systems, or I open up, the playbook of something I built for a client, they're like, there's like 787 separate steps in here. It didn't happen overnight. We started with 5 things. So let's just start with 5 things. If you find a prospect that you think might be a good fit for an interview-based question that then you can add into something that you offer to your community or offer to your prospects once a quarter, Bob's sales, insights from all the people I've been talking with, something like that. I'm going to interview them. I'm going to capture it in my CRM. I'm going to do, put it in an article or add that quote to the Word doc I've got on my desktop. And then once a quarter, once a week, once a month, however often you actually want to compile those, that might, it's a great time to do it, right? But have that repeatable somewhere outside of your head. Otherwise, and I've made this mistake, you'll interview brilliant people, you'll get great quotes, and it'll never leave, the C drive on your computer. Unfortunately. So I know you know what I'm talking about.
What's really cool about the methodology or the system that we have put together, and whether it's us or whoever, the great thing about a system, especially the ones that we have created, is that for every new prospect that gets into our system that we interview, it becomes another piece of content. So I now have 1,200 pieces of content that are out there talking about the wins and victories, but the struggles that person has had when it comes to marketing their products or comes to selling. So I have all of these different, I have accounting, I have probably a whole season of accounting people, a whole season of leadership people, a whole season of entrepreneur episodes. And all of these episodes become content that I can then use as part of my prospecting tool.
Right.
Hey, here's a really cool episode that I did with John Smith. Listen to this episode, and then, let me know if you're interested in coming on the show. They don't hear a sales process in there.
And people make this mistake with testimonials a lot too, in that they live buried on page 8 of a website, and they're never actively leveraged. And so something that we devoted a whole chapter to in Bulletproof Selling was, let's take some of those testimonials, in this case, prospect interviews, and let's actively leverage them. So build them into your outbound campaigns, build them into that introductory email, build them into that onboarding process to give people a little more, emotional well-being. That I know it's a new company, I haven't done business with these folks, but I just heard from 3 people like me that have gotten great results and experiences. So we've got the trigger, we've got making it repeatable. Now I want to make it improvable. So this is where we dive into, all right, I started with 5 steps. But now, I may not ever make it over to Doug Sandler's 1,700 separate steps, but how do I begin improving my process in the way that I interview, the way that I compile, the way that I release to my community? What am I looking at to make sure that this is getting better over time?
Yeah, if you're not growing, you're dying. So,
Mhm.
so you always want to fine tune things. I mean, we've been doing this for almost 5 years. We've launched over 200 shows over the last 5 years. One thing that we know is that this is not a perfect system. We are always refining and changing and revising things. It's really easy if you're only measuring one thing. Did I close a deal or did I not close a deal? That, one in the win column, one in the lose column. Okay, so I
Mhm.
got one in the lose column. How do I make one in the win column? But it's the trickle effect of all of these steps along the way that would determine, something that would be improvable. So you need to look at each one of those steps. And what I would say is, and you hit it right on the head a few moments ago, Sean, is you don't want to have 1,500 steps out of the gate. If you have 5 steps, and you're like, oh, I can see where this step is the bottleneck right now. Like our
Mhm.
pre-qualification application wasn't getting enough people in the door. So we had to revise the questions. Maybe the questions were a little bit too sales focused. Maybe they
Mm.
tipped our hand a little too early in the process and people didn't take advantage of it. So we started to change some of that. A back end system like project management software. We weren't using project management software. We were just using email. And we realized after 10 or 15 clients, that, man, we have 300 emails going through our
Yeah.
system, every day or every week. So when we started having project management software, that really made it a lot easier for our customers to communicate with us and vice versa. So
Mhm.
everything needs to be measurable along the way. The fewer steps you have in the beginning, the better it is. So I would say, yes, you absolutely want to start making improvements right out of the gate so that you understand where there's issues, where there's not issues. It's not a set it and forget it process. Everything is going back, revise, revise, revise.
And I can't find anything, and I've really looked hard, Doug, in any salesperson's systemization of what they do, assuming they're using systems, that it's set it and forget it, because the world changes and our
Yep.
prospect needs change and society changes and pandemics happen. Well, what worked 2 years ago is absolutely not going to get me results today. So I've got to constantly iterate and update. Now, you mentioned something that is the actual M in trim, which is measure. So I'm a salesperson, I'm making calls, I'm sending emails, but I'm noticing every fifth or sixth call, I'm finding someone willing to give me a nice quote or an insight that would really be valuable to my community. And I'm pursuing them, longer term, letting them know, hey, I just released that blog where we were able to include your quote, Bob. Thanks so much for giving that to me. Listen, you mentioned you were having challenge X, Y, and Z. We've discovered some things about that since we chatted. Love to hop on the phone with you. So I've got my follow-up steps in place. Well, how do I measure over the course of time if this interview-based selling is really worth long-term investment in? What am I measuring? Results? Am I measuring prospect contacts? What do I begin measuring?
Well, you can measure your list size. I mean, that certainly
Mm.
doesn't hurt to measure. Okay, if you had 5,000 at the end of the month, you have 5,200 because you've created a funnel for this process and automated that front end of your system. That's a great way to do it. Obviously, if you're making a sale versus not making a sale, that's something measurable, but that's only measuring the dollars and cents. The things that you want to look at are, how many touch points do you need in order to make a sale? How
Mm.
many opportunities do you need to have with that prospect in order for you to see if this is something that they even be interested in moving forward with? What works better? JV partnerships to get people in the door, me prospecting outbound, me prospecting inbound. What's the best? You have to really see, where are these leads, where are they coming from? So each one of these areas is something that you got to measure. I mean, if you're not measuring them, then you never want to rely upon, as you said, you never want to rely upon, geez, I hope that works. The
Mhm.
longer you're doing something, probably the better that you are getting at it. So maybe you take somebody that is newer on your team and in sales, maybe you put them through the same process too, and see if the same results happen if somebody else on your team tries it as opposed to you. The other thing that you want to look at is, how far removed can you remain from the system in order for there to still be success in the system? The last thing that you want as a salesperson is for you to, I would prefer not having to work 60 hours a week. So I
Yeah.
don't. If I could work 2 or 3 hours a day and get the same results than working 60 hours a week, that would be great. So how far removed can you put yourself from the system and still have the system work for you? So all of those things are absolutely measurable. And
Mm-hmm.
the more that you're doing to get yourself closer to staying in that, let's call it your zone of genius, as Gay Hendricks calls it from The Big Leap, the closer you can get to staying in your zone of genius, whether that's building relationships and selling and staying outside of spreadsheets and the other stuff that are, that's just dragging you down mentally, the better you will be in this process. So each one of those steps along the way has some level of measurement to it as well.
Absolutely. So that an end-to-end, a complete sales system for how do I take the conversations I'm having today and begin creating things that will be of value to all the prospects that I talk to. So now I have these assets I'm building that are not my words, the world of some guy trying to sell something, but peers of the people that I'm selling to, who they will pay attention to because they recognize the names, they recognize the companies, and they're in the seats of the people with the same challenges that I'm trying to solve with my products and services. So, Doug, thanks so much for helping us build that system. Now, I want to give people a way to get in touch with you because you've got so many assets in interview-based selling, your books, your podcast, videos, articles, all the things. How do we get deeper into your world?
So I know that there is I know, again, I said it earlier, I'm a podcasting hammer, so everything looks like a podcasting nail. So the thing that I would like to share with your community is one of our little mini courses. It's called 5 Ways to Make Money Podcasting. And they can just get that from the number 5 ways to make money podcasting.com. You can just go there and see how podcasting could potentially benefit your business as well. Understanding it does not need to be podcasting that is the tool. You could probably plug in blogging or Facebook Live or anything, but because podcast production is my business, I've done it all around podcasting. So it's the number 5 ways to make money podcasting.com.
Awesome, sir. Awesome. And then for keeping up with your books, if I had to start with one of your books, which one do I need to go to?
It would probably be the one that has done the best on the market, which is Nice Guys Finish First, and they can just go over to Amazon and pick up a copy of that. I think it's still in print. I'm pretty sure it has. I know I have an audio version of it. But if they're out of it, just tell them to call me. I have a few cases of it here in my home. Just
awesome.
Just reach out to me directly.
So thank you so much for your time today, Doug. I mean, it's always great to meet another sales professional who takes the idea of relationship building seriously. And of course, systems, which are a great way to help us accomplish that. So for all of you out there watching Bulletproof Selling or checking this out on the podcast, make sure you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for these live streams. They're all archived there. Dozens of them at this point with great sales leaders like Doug. And of course, the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere the podcast can be found. So for more sales systems to help you replace hope with certainty, to give you better pipeline performance, make sure you're checking out the free resources that we are dropping every day of the week over at bulletproof-selling.com. Well, Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside Mr. Doug Sandler. Doug, let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.
All right, man. Get out there and go sell something, please.
Yeah, absolutely.